and Young Adult Podcast.
Welcome to podcast 143, everybody. And I just saw something really cool on social media.
Okay.
So it's Super Bowl week.
It is.
And, I don't know how I feel about it.
Not good.
I know. So, but they're doing all the player interviews.
Yeah.
And they did a big player interview with Saquon Barkley. And they asked him a question, what are your top 3 running backs right now in the NFL?
Okay.
And he said, well, I won't name myself, so I'll name 3 others. And he said Derrick Henry.
Yep.
Gibbs.
Okay.
And I forget his third. After he said Gibbs, I blacked out.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I'll be honest. If you asked me to put the top 3 running backs in the NFL right now, I would say it's Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah. Yeah, Saquon Barkley for sure. Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs apparently. Jahmyr Gibbs in just this last NFL season averaged 6.3 yards per carry. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. That's stupid numbers.
He also had the inside the regular season had the most touchdowns.
Yeah.
And he was third in, I think, overall net yards. He was third in 2 really important categories. Only two, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, but he had almost half of the touches that they had because he splits time with Demo.
So essentially you're telling me he's better. I heard it. I heard you say it.
Maybe
that's what I'm saying. He has the 3rd most yards with half the touches.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, wow.
I mean, well, that's what the numbers are saying. I'm not saying that, but the numbers are saying it. I'm just repeating it.
Yeah, I would say that he's our best player now that he finished year 2.
Yeah,
he's our best player on the team. He's crazy. I mean, you want the ball in his hands as much as Jared Goff's hands.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's really funny. This is totally kind of random, but it's really funny to look back 2 years ago during the draft when everybody was just freaking out, losing their mind that we drafted a running back.
Well, when we drafted him, I'm like, who?
Yeah, I didn't know who he was.
How can he be so hidden?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
But we got him, and I liked him, right? After watching him a little bit in training camp or hearing about it, I was like, I think this was a good pick. And
when we grabbed him, I was like, who? I didn't know who he was. A running back from Alabama.
Yeah.
I know all the running backs from Alabama. I didn't know he was a running back for Alabama. So I looked up his stats, and there was one stat that I liked.
Okay.
He had on Alabama as the starting running back. He had the most receiving yards in the team that year.
All right.
So he was a better wide receiver than their wide receivers.
Yeah.
This is an interesting pick.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. This is more than a running back. So.
Well, all right. So we're going to move on here in a second, but I'm just going to say this.
Oh man. No.
This was last offseason. I was listening to an interview with Brad Holmes, and he said that he's like, I don't want to make headlines in April. He said, I want to make headlines in January. And he said, you can't judge a draft pick in April during the draft. He said, you can judge a draft pick after 2 years of NFL seasons.
Yeah.
He said that's when you can judge a draft pick.
That's when you can judge the draft.
Yeah.
So how was Brad Holmes' 2023 draft?
Well, apparently it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And his 2022 draft as well.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. That's all I have to say about it, but it's pretty cool.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's still Super Bowl week, and I'm sad as a Lions fan. I want the Eagles to win, but the Chiefs will win.
Yeah.
And so
you know what I want it to just be a terrible, lousy game that the Eagles end up winning. If I could have my way, that's what I would want. But,
Really?
I won't get it.
You want a terrible, lousy game where the Eagles win?
Yeah, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know what I want. I just want the Lions to be in the Super Bowl.
That's what I really want, but,
Yeah.
next year maybe.
Well, Super Bowl is this Sunday, so we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
It's not really going to affect me anyway.
No.
Anyway.
No.
Who winner doesn't really matter who wins this. It's not really going to affect me.
Not at all.
I'm not invested too much.
You know what is this is how I feel about this Super Bowl. This sums it up perfectly.
Tell me.
We have a text thread with some of our friends, and you had texted out, "Are we going to have a Super Bowl party?"
Yes, because I don't know how it started, but there's a tradition where I host a Super Bowl party every year.
Yeah, I don't know how it started either.
I don't know how it started.
But it just happened.
Yeah.
And one of our friends responded back that they would value the friendship much more than the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I would the hanging out sounds great.
I'm more
What's
excited.
on TV is really doesn't matter to me too much.
I'm more excited about the menu
Yeah.
than the game.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel.
No. When Kendra responded she's bringing sliders, I was like, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm getting excited about the menu.
So Kendra said she was bringing sliders, and then your wife said you were having meatballs, and I was like, yeah, we need to be at this party.
I was opening the fridge this morning getting some breakfast, and I thought to myself for some reason, we should have a hot fudge sundae bar.
Yeah. That's always a good answer.
Some chocolate, vanilla, strawberry ice cream, some Hershey syrup, nuts, bananas, whipped cream.
Yeah, I mean, let's do that.
Does that sound good?
That sounds so good.
I think so too. All right, let's transition into our topic.
Yeah, let's get into it. I'm not sure what we're going to call this.
No, we never are.
We never know. We figure it out somewhere along the way. We're like Michael Scott. We just start a sentence and we hope we figure out where it goes.
Might I say this, that I never know what to title these podcasts when I post them. I absolutely never know. And every single time that I sit at that computer and stare at that screen, I'm like insecure about the title.
The title of it?
Yeah, I'm like, is this gonna? Because you want the title to be read by somebody and say, "Ooh, I want to know what that's about."
Yeah, right.
So that's hard to think of sometimes.
Oh, yeah, it is. You kidding?
We don't know what to call this podcast.
We don't know what to call this.
But we know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about silence.
It's golden, they say.
400 years of it.
Let's see how much gold we can give him right now. 1, 2, 3. All right, over there. That's awkward.
Oh, yeah.
I gave you a couple seconds of gold there, folks.
Nobody wants a podcast full of silence.
But people do want a pocket full of gold.
Yeah.
So,
anyway.
yeah, we are going to talk about silence, though.
We are going to talk about silence, and we're going to talk about Nehemiah.
Yes.
And Jesus.
Yes.
And the time in between.
So it's interesting because Nehemiah was the last of God's men that he uses in the Old Testament.
Right.
Now, when you read the Old Testament and you come to the book of Nehemiah, it's kind of in the middle of the Old Testament.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so if you're unaware of the timeline of the world events, you'd kind of just assume, this is somewhere in the middle of Adam and Malachi's life.
Yeah.
Right? Because Malachi is the final book in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And then, Matthew's next. Jesus is on the scene. So you kind of get this mindset of like, okay, Nehemiah must have lived, somewhere in the middle between Adam and Malachi. But that's actually not the truth of the chronological order of events. As a matter of fact, Malachi was not the last. He was right in the same time frame of Nehemiah.
Yeah.
But Nehemiah was actually the last man to be used by God. If you do look up, it's pretty easy to do. If you just look up, like when did Malachi live? Well, he lived around 460 BC. But Nehemiah did his exploits around 444 BC. So it's oddly enough, we count backwards.
Right. Up to Jesus.
Up to Jesus, and then it starts counting forwards after Jesus. So 444 is later than 460.
Later than 460, right. It's good math there.
As Barbie once said when you pulled her string on her back, math is hard. Did you know that?
No.
Which became famously laughed at, mocked. So math is hard.
Math's hard, guys.
Nehemiah was the last. He was the final man to be used by God.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a title.
Yeah, you brought this up, and I was trying to think. He is a cupbearer.
Yes.
And then he's kind of like...
he's also a slave.
Yes.
Because he's a Hebrew.
Right. He was probably descendant of those who were taken captive in the Babylonian captivity.
Probably. So he would have seen the crumble of the Babylonian Empire and the rise of the Persian Empire.
Right. And then he's a cupbearer to the king of Persia.
I think his name is Artaxerxes.
Yeah, I think so. There's an Artaxerxes and there's also a Xerxes.
Yeah, I think Xerxes is his son.
Yeah.
I think, of Artaxerxes. Or it's the other way around.
It could be the other way around,
But anyway, he's a cupbearer to Artaxerxes, I believe.
And then he becomes like a foreman in Jerusalem.
Yes.
So he doesn't have this like judge, prophet, priest, king type of title.
Not at all.
He's very much just a layman.
Yes.
But he's fully surrendered to God.
If you do some research into Nehemiah and you get to understand a little bit of who he is, because yes, he is cupbearer for the king. Yes, he is a slave, but it's pretty clear that he is more like a Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whereas highly skilled.
Yeah.
To the point where he was entrusted to live his life actually in the king's court.
Yeah.
Is what the history of Nehemiah says. He lived a lavish life, even though he was a slave.
Yeah.
But he had earned his way to become, a person in the king's court. He, like I said, he lived a lavish life. He would have lived in the king's palace. He would have had wonderful clothes. He would have been fed the king's food, because the cupbearer, if you're unaware what a cupbearer is, essentially his job was to test the king's food and drink for poison.
Yep.
So not really the greatest of jobs, but...
I mean, it came with its perks. If someone's trying to poison the king, yes, you'll get poisoned first, but... You get to live in the palace. You get to eat the king's food.
You live a lavish life.
You get that lifestyle.
And he became very well respected. And there's an interesting verse in the Bible in Nehemiah chapter 1 that says, I appeared for the first time ever sad in the king's presence.
I was actually just going to bring that verse up.
And so that really tells me Nehemiah, he was a well-respected gentleman who carried himself in a right manner. He probably had an English accent.
Yeah.
And he carried himself well. He had a wonderful spirit about him.
Yeah.
He earned his position. He held it with integrity, and he had a relationship with the king, the emperor, actually.
Yeah.
He had a relationship with the emperor, and he was a slave. So he did something right in his lifetime.
Yeah, and it was obviously a pretty close relationship where they at least were on very good terms, because all of a sudden he does show up to the king looking sad, and the emperor notices.
He is concerned.
And is very concerned for Nehemiah. So you can see there was some level of closeness. We don't know exactly what that is, but some level of closeness where he shows up for work that day, and he's sad. And the king literally takes notice of it and says, like, look, what's going on? Why are you so sad?
Yeah, he says, you've never been sad in my presence before. What is this?
What's
going on?
you?
What's going on? What is this? And so Nehemiah begins to pour out his heart to him about his people.
Yeah.
His people that he's lost touch with. Mm-hmm. He has nothing to do with. He doesn't need. He's had up to this point, it doesn't appear that anybody from back home has needed him.
Right.
And he hasn't needed any of them either.
Yeah.
He has worked himself up into a position of honor and respect.
Yeah.
And a messenger has come to him with a message.
Yeah.
That his home,
Yeah.
that he doesn't know anything about,
Right. Yeah.
is in ruins.
It's in ruins. His homeland is broken down and burned. And the story of Nehemiah is really, really a fascinating one.
It is. What do we call Nehemiah? What do we call him? I think because you can't call him a king, you can't call him a prophet. He's not a judge.
He's not a priest.
He's not a priest.
Yeah.
What I have found to be a title for Nehemiah, which I really like, is a champion.
Yeah. You said that earlier, and I really like that.
A champion. And he's God's last champion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's God's last champion that we see in the Old Testament. And this is where we kind of wanted to get into some ideas here that we have, is we see this incredible story of Nehemiah. And then there's what scholars call the 400 years of silence. In between God speaking to the prophets, God using Nehemiah before Jesus shows up.
It's actually longer than 400 years, but yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's a little bit longer. That's how it's always used to refer to those, that 400 years.
Yeah. It's easier to say 400 years, and that's why we refer to it like that.
Yeah.
If you want to be like super specific, it's probably more like 461 years. But that's
somewhere in there.
That's not as doesn't roll off the palate as easily.
Right. And I think, Pastor Luke, this is purely my theory, but I think that God was still at work in the lives of the Israelites, not in the way so much that we've seen in the Old Testament, because there's nothing more written. But here's the reason why I think that God was still working, God was still softening hearts, God was still lining things up, is because if you go to Luke chapter 1, Luke lays out the story of Zechariah and John the Baptist being born. And we see that Luke refers to Zechariah as this priest, but that he is serving God. His heart is devoted to God. That there hasn't been this total loss where the Jewish people have totally abandoned God or totally moved into a system of complete legalism, like some of the Pharisees had done. That there still is some of the Israelite people.
A remnant.
There's a remnant that are still very much devoted to God. And that Zechariah was one of them, and he was part of the Levitical priesthood, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So I think there's still this remnant that is very much devoted to God that continues during those 400 years.
The walls that Nehemiah built are still standing when Jesus is alive.
Absolutely.
As a matter of fact, Jesus makes mention of the walls in many teaching times and illustrations.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
He says, you see these stones, one laid upon the other? I promise you that none of these will be standing.
None of these will be standing. Not one stone will be left on top of another.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think there is still this remnant that was holding on to the promise. I've heard pastors and people talk about this, that pre-Jesus, pre the incarnation, pre-God coming to earth, that people were saved by looking forward to the Messiah.
Absolutely.
And I think that there was still people looking forward to the Messiah during that. But God wasn't speaking. God wasn't prophesying. God wasn't sending people to the Israelites. And I think this is, I'm just reading through the Gospels again right now. And Jesus tells this parable. I might be in all the Gospels. I'm not sure. It's in a number of them anyway.
It's probably in 3 of them.
Probably.
John's always different.
And he tells the parable of the vineyard owner.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And I love this parable because it's like some of his parables, the disciples are like, now, what did that mean again, Jesus? Mm-hmm. And this one, it says everybody knew exactly what he was talking about.
That's interesting because the Bible it's prophesied of Jesus that he'll speak in riddles, in parables.
Yeah.
And so that those with ears won't be able to hear, and those
Right.
with eyes won't be able to see and understand, and they won't be able to see and understand. But they understood that one.
Yeah, everybody got that one. I love the Bible. Literally, is like, yeah, everybody knew what he was talking about.
What'd you mean by that, Jesus? And Jesus tells the parable of the owner of the vineyard, and they're like, we hate you, Jesus. We
Yeah.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, but in that parable,
It's funny how they knew that one, huh?
I know. It always makes me laugh. I don't
That's
know
funny.
why.
I've never seen that before.
It gets me though. He does. My point of bringing that up was he talks about, okay, so I'm going to send, the vineyard owner said, I'm going to send this servant and this servant and this servant and this servant and this servant. He said, finally, I'm going to send my son.
Because surely they won't kill my son.
Surely they'll respect my son, right?
Yeah.
And he was obviously, and Jesus mentions this, but he was talking about the prophets.
Yes, he was talking about Jeremiah.
His Jeremiah and Isaiah and even Malachi, Nehemiah. I'm sending these people to my chosen people.
Moses, yes.
And they rejected them. And we see that after Malachi or Nehemiah being the last one, that he's like, okay, I'm not going to send anybody else until I send my son. Mm. And there's this break where he's saying, you don't want to listen to me. Fine. My son will come. Mm. And so there's a little bit, there's my ideas, theories, thoughts about it.
Yeah, I would say too, why all the silence? Why is Nehemiah the last one? And why is the last one building the temple? Because you'd think the last one would do something greater, would have a title.
Yeah.
Would be somebody more like a David.
Right.
Or even a Solomon.
Uh-huh.
Solomon, he wrote books and he offered up so much wisdom, and he originally built the temple.
Right.
Like, why does it have to be Nehemiah? And why does it have to be almost a titleless individual?
Right.
Yeah, I don't like the word titleless, but what's a better word for that? Why does it have to be somebody with no title? And why is his job so basic? Mm-hmm. A mason.
Yeah, it's literally just they're laying stones on top of each other.
He's a very smart man.
Oh yeah, very smart.
He's multi-talented.
Yeah.
He's able to hold conversations with the king. He knows multiple languages. Mm-hmm. He probably knows Hebrew and he knows Persian, whatever that language you're speaking there in Persia.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's Persian. He's has held himself in high respect, high regard. Mm-hmm. He carries himself well.
He's clearly an analytical person because he crafts this brilliant plan and strategist. That's probably better. He's a brilliant strategist. Creates this incredible strategy to rebuild the walls so quickly. Refuses to be distracted and go to the plane of oh no. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Incredibly brilliant. But again, just building a wall.
You know who else? So the last one on the scene is a mason.
Yeah.
And then the next one on the scene is a mason.
It's true. Come on.
That's interesting. But he was building different. He's a different kind of cornerstone layer.
Yeah, come on. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But you see here, God is saying something, I believe, with an individual like a Nehemiah. I think God is communicating that he will use anybody who is willing to have courage.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about there's a phrase that is used a lot in church leadership circles and maybe even, like team building stuff at colleges and high schools. And it's this phrase like, see a need, take the lead.
Yes.
Right? You've heard that. You've probably heard it 1,000 times.
Yes.
And that is really what Nehemiah does. Is he gets a message. The walls of Jerusalem still lay broken and burned. And he could have been like, oh man, that sucks.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay here living in the palace.
Well, yeah. You know what a good person would have done after getting that message? You know what? If Nehemiah was a good person, you know what he would have done?
What would he have done?
He would have said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to gather some money up.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you back with a bunch of money, and we're going to help.
Right.
And I'm going to pray.
I'm going to pray. Yeah.
That's what a good person would have done.
Yeah.
But you know what a great person would have done? A champion
Yeah.
type person? They would have gone back to Jerusalem.
They would have gone back. Yeah.
Rebuilt the wall themselves.
Yeah.
And these people are still needed today.
Yeah. Come on.
Not just good people who say, "Oh, wow, that's such a sad story. You know what we're going to do for you? I'm going to help you out, brother.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray for you. And you know what else? I'm going to give you some money.
Yeah.
I'm going to help you out."
Right.
That's a good person. We got a lot of those people.
Yeah.
We need great people.
Come on.
We need great people. Man, somebody who's really willing to risk it all for the nation. When great people rise up, the Bible says, when a righteous person reigns, the Bible says, the people rejoice.
The people rejoice. Yeah.
We need great people. And we need more champions these days.
Come on.
Everybody's looking for a champion. You know,
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, you're looking for you're looking for a victory.
That's right.
You know, everybody's looking for. If you're, got to give it up for the Eagles fans, I guess. If you're an Eagles fan, you're looking for a champion. You want them to be champions.
Jen Lucas.
You know, shout out to the Buckeyes.
Yeah.
They're champions.
Champions.
2025 champions of college football. Everybody wants a champion so desperately. We really do. We desire a champion.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been into wrestling, the fake wrestling, WWE? When I was growing up, it was WWF, then it transitioned to WWE.
I was never too much into it. I have one of my cousins was like huge into it, so I was like watching a little bit at his house, but like I never was like super into it.
So when I was in middle school, me and my friends, we absolutely lived and breathed wrestling.
Okay.
WWE.
Yeah.
There was Monday night. Wrestling was on TV every Monday night, and we would hop on the phone call, and me and two other friends would do a three-way phone call on the phone together during the like hour and a half long wrestling matches.
Yeah.
And it would always lead up to this big moment in the end that would most of the time be a cliffhanger of some sort.
Yeah.
But you had somebody you were rooting for. You wanted somebody to win, and it all crescendoed to the big wrestling match that was on pay-per-view that none of us ever watched, which was really sad.
Yeah.
And the champion would be crowned.
Yeah.
And you didn't know who that was until the next day because you didn't have pay-per-view and you didn't have the internet.
Yeah,
which is weird to think about. So you were so excited about a champion to be crowned.
Yeah.
In wrestling, and that's fake.
Yeah, right.
And we all had our favorites.
Yeah.
Me personally, I was a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan.
Okay.
And he just, he had that spirit about him I liked. I resonated with.
All right.
He didn't give a rip about nothing. And he had that move, the Stone Cold Stunner.
Uh-huh.
And he'd just go around Stone Cold Stunner everybody. and the ladies too. And the referees. And he'd stand in the middle of the ring, everybody down on the ground because he's Stone Cold Stunnered every single one of them, holding up his fist. Then he'd drink a beer and walk off.
Yeah.
That's my kind of guy right there. That's my kind of champion. It just resonated with me. He's my spirit animal, you know what I'm saying? But we all want a champion so bad. You want your sports team to be a champion.
Yeah.
You want your wrestler to be the champion. You're each kind of like, we all have like, the science world is looking for a champion.
Right.
The media, Hollywood.
Yeah.
Wants a champion so bad. They want a champion so bad that they created awards for themselves.
That's funny.
The Grammys,
Yeah.
the Oscars. Like,
Oh, yeah.
What do? We need to crown a champion. We're so in love with ourselves. Let's do it.
Let's
you know?
give ourselves awards.
Yeah,
That's funny.
And because they're desperate. Everybody's desperate for like a champion.
Yeah.
And the Christian world is still today, I do believe, desperate for a man or a woman to rise up and say something like, "Not in my town,
Yeah. Come on.
not in my school, not in my church."
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, you know. As for me and my house,
Right.
we're going to serve the Lord.
Yeah.
People are desperate for that because we're weak and tired,
Yeah.
and we don't always feel in the mood.
Yeah.
Actually, we mentioned this a little bit on the radio this week
Yeah.
about how when you come to church tired, you're looking for somebody else to bring the energy.
Yeah,
Whether it's
absolutely.
the worship leader or the pastor preaching that day. You want somebody to bring the energy because you're not feeling it, but boy, when they do, you grab onto it.
Yeah.
They rose up. They were the champion.
Yeah. You know what is so interesting about Nehemiah? We can kind of maybe wrap up or start wrapping up with this.
Yeah.
Nehemiah had to rally some people who were kind of, you know, being a little discouraged.
Absolutely.
And he was so passionate, maybe, I'm not sure what the word is, so strategic to give everyone these tasks that they could do. Hey, you just work right in front of your house. You work right in front of your house. You do this gate. You do this gate. You build, you know, that tower. All the, you know, you can. It's a big long list of what everybody did. But Nehemiah rallied the people of Jerusalem to accomplish a task that I'm sure they all wanted. Nobody wanted to live in Jerusalem with no walls. Everybody was saying, hey, the walls need to get fixed. Hey, the walls need to get fixed. The walls need to get fixed, but nobody was doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Nehemiah came along and said, all right, the walls need to get fixed. Let's fix them. Let's rebuild the wall. Rallied everybody to build the walls around Jerusalem. And God used him in a mighty, mighty way to bring back some of that priestly order to Jerusalem that wasn't there. But he had to, everybody saw there was a problem. Anybody can point out anybody can be a critic. Say, hey, there's a problem there.
All you got to do is have my eyes. You can see the problem.
Exactly. It takes somebody great. It takes a champion to say, hey, look, this is the problem. This is what we're going to do about it. Let's all get on board and let's make this thing happen.
Yeah, Nehemiah was a wonderful man of God, and we need more like him today. Yeah. You don't need a title.
Come on.
And you don't even need to be, you can be a nobody from nowhere.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what Nehemiah was.
Yeah.
Really a nobody from nowhere. And he came in, and he did it.
Come on.
That's what we need.
That's what we need.
It's been great to be with you today, audience.
I love it. This has been a fun one.
It has. It has been a fun one.
All right.
It's like a walk in the woods, and unexpected, pleasant surprises along the way.
Okay, that's not where I was going to go.
How do you describe this podcast?
Well, usually we go with some kind of food analogy.
I know. It didn't feel like food today to me.
I was going to
you?
think of when you were a kid and you had the cereal and it had like the surprise toy inside.
Oh.
And you were like dumping your bowl of cereal and whoa, I got a little tech deck skateboard, something like that. You're like, yeah, let's go. That's what it was.
You're right. We're both right.
We can't be wrong. We'll see you on the next one, everybody.
Bye.
Youth and Young Adult Podcast. Youth and Young Adult Podcast. Youth and Young Adult Podcast.